I am Brother Cornell West.
This is Chris Hedges.
I'm Rosa Clemente.
Hey, what's up? This is Chuck D, Public Enemy, Prophets of Rage.
And this is Newsbeat.
Peace and love, everybody. It's your man, Manny Faces, bringing you This Week in Social Justice, presented by the Newsbeat podcast. As you heard, some people, I don't know who they are, but they said that we're us. So good for them. We're here every Wednesday night live and direct at 8 p.m. Eastern time on your Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook dials. This Week in Social Justice. It's not entirely clear, but what we like to go over is things that happened this week in the world of social justice. I'm not sure if y'all got that for the title. I'm your man, Manny Faces, the conductor of this wild train, joined as always by my friends and colleagues, Mr. Christopher Tawarski, the editor-in-chief of both Newsbeat and This Week in Social Justice, and Rashed Mian, the managing editor of both as well, respectively. Gentlemen, what's good? How are you?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing pretty good. Still digging out of boxes because I moved recently, as we talked about last week. And just as a shout out to the people who are watching this, we put a lot of work into this show, and we really do a lot at the last minute. And I need y'all to appreciate that quietly to yourselves, because my brothers know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so yes, we are rocking. We are still going. Of course, if you're watching on the video tip, we are a full-fledged podcast, an award-winning podcast. I'll get to that in a second. But we've won several awards in the past, covering social justice topics very deeply, very intricately and intimately, compelling way, mixing music with high-level journalism. So we'll interview very acclaimed experts and activists about issues at hand that sometimes don't get the right attention via mainstream media, and sometimes even not through alternative media. We mix those episodes with music, and very often our sort of secret sauce is that we'll very often bring in independent hip-hop artists to craft original lyrics for that episode. It's crazy. It's like a documentary and a music video all rolled into one. We've done a great number of episodes that have covered a great number of topics. So if you're watching us on a video tip and you like what we do here, make sure you're listening to Newsbeat the podcast wherever you find podcasts. That's actually the kind of core of who we are. We branched off and started doing this show last year at some point, and came back to bring you every Wednesday now pretty consistently This Week in Social Justice. So I just want people who are watching to know that we're a podcast, and people who are listening on the podcast to know that this is actually a live video feed. You should join us every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. Find us at usnewsbeat.com/Twizzage, which stands for This Week in Social Justice. Or if you can't remember that, usnewsbeat.com/watch. You'll have all the past episodes as well as links to watch current episodes. So now that that's out of the way, gentlemen, please tell me why I sound excited, because I'm excited about tonight's show. We have two illustrious guests. Sometimes we have one illustrious guest. Sometimes we have one horrible guest. No, I'm just kidding. We never have horrible guests. We do all right. We do pretty good over here. But please.
One time we had a guy with a fish.
We had a guy with a cuttlefish or some ancient cephalopod or whatever. Sometimes we get abducted by UFOs on the show. It's actually wild.
That's right.
But this week, please, gentlemen, we have two guests. Please describe them in brief detail.
Yeah, sure. So at first up, and I think he's already waiting on us, is Lewis Conway Jr., National Campaign Strategist for the ACLU. And Lewis will be on to talk about this thing that the Biden administration is doing, where they're basically backing a directive put out by the Trump administration that will eventually send thousands of people back to federal prison who were released because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And then around 8:30 or so, we're going to have Dr. Ram Sundarish. He's a co-author of a groundbreaking study that came out earlier this month that connected incarceration with worse health outcomes for family members of people who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. It's really a mind-blowing study and research that they did, connecting all the dots with the consequences of mass incarceration in this country. So we are looking forward to that.
Incredible topics to talk about. As someone, as you guys know, that has a brother from another mother that is currently incarcerated, that topic means a lot to me. So before we get into Mr. Conway Jr., we will. I just want to make an announcement. Normally we do news bites and we do little snippets of news that you might not have heard about. We're going to do them either between our guests or after our guests. We wanted to keep be respectful of time and schedule. But I have about 2 minutes to tell you that the New York Times ain't jack. Like the Wall Street Journal is whack. Bloomberg News can't hold a torch. None of y'all are seeing us right now.
WNYC,
zilch, nada, nothing.
Come on, they got Brian Lair. And
I don't care. I don't care.
What about CBS News and Politico?
CBS News can get these nuts. Politico got nothing on us.
What about the Associated Press? And
I'm
what about
sorry,
Bloomberg News.
No, none of them, because
Pineapple Street Radio,
Newsbeat podcast, best journalism podcast of the year at the New York Press Club Awards. This is major because, yes, all of those aforementioned cornball ass outlets
They ain't got nothing
to us. The podcast of the year. We won for a very important. This is the second time we won this award. We won it back in 2018. Again, beating the same cadre of outlets. It's an amazing thing because a podcast with rappers in it was the best journalism podcast of the year. This year, because of COVID, we obviously didn't have a lot of our episodes didn't have our amazing artists. Shouts to Silent Night, the band called Fuse, who were featured in our prior win. We weren't able to use our artists this year as much as we'd like to, but this episode was extremely important to us. We were incredibly proud to put it together, and we felt that it was super important because at the time when most of these outlets themselves were not saying the names or centering the stories or the historic stories for sure of state violence against black women and girls in America. We did a really amazing episode about it. Who do we have on this episode? Please just let people know real quick.
Yeah, we had Michelle Jacobs, professor of law, and we had Andrea Ritchie, author and researcher and activist, and they broke down really the historical legacy of these horrors from the foundation of our country up through to the police brutality cases of today.
Yep.
And as Manny mentioned, during the George Floyd rebellion, a lot of male victims were getting attention, rightfully so, deservingly so, but completely left out of these conversations were all the women and the girls who, hundreds have been, slain, and our experts, Michelle Jacobs and Andrea Ritchie really painted this moving chronicling of these crimes. And the lead for that story, which is on our website, starts with Andrea Ritchie just saying to us, I'm looking at a poster in my room right now with the names of 100 slain black women and girls, and it starts with a 3-year-old. It's just completely underreported, and we dedicate as Manny said, this is a huge, prestigious award. All the mainstream outlets, especially in New York, are part of this thing. We took it, and we really dedicate this award to the two guests we had on that episode who have dedicated their lives to telling these stories. And also we dedicate this, to the victims and the survivors. And, we implore all of those aforementioned media outlets to cover this story. We call upon them to do so. And we're going to continue to do so as well.
Yeah, I think we're going to spend some time revisiting this episode in depth. Obviously, along with the win, there's supposed to be some kind of, unveiling of awards or whatever. And we'd love to dedicate an episode of This Week in Social Justice to this. So more on this to come. Please check out our podcast feed where you could find this episode, or our website, usnewsbeat.com. I just want to play a quick snippet. This is one of our snippets from this episode, and then we'll move on to tonight's first guest, just to give you a taste of what this sounds like. I joke about all the outlets, that we, smacked and dropped the elbow on, but really proud of this episode. It's a story we wish we didn't have to tell, but we are very, like you said, honored by our guests and the stories that were shared with us and that we were able to give some life to. So here's a snippet from Say Her Name, confronting 400 years of state violence against Black women and girls.
Certainly, state-sponsored violence against Black women has existed from the moment the first Black woman was dragged to these shores.
Considered as a foremother of the African-American community, historians believe Angelo boarded a ship in Angola before heading to Vera Cruz and finishing her voyage in Jamestown on the James River. She appears in the colony's census documents in 1624 and 1625. She worked for a wealthy family and lived alongside white servants.
The women weren't just stuffed into the boats, but of course they were also used as tools of pleasure for the sailors who were on the boats. So not only were they shackled to other human beings in these insufferable conditions, but they were also brought on board to be raped and to be used as sexual tools for the sailors. So there's never been a time in the entire United States history where Black women have not been violently assaulted, both by the state as well as individuals.
From that moment forward, Black women have, and in the moments leading up to that, through kidnapping from the African continent and through the Middle Passage, Black women have experienced all of the same forms of state-sponsored violence, state-sanctioned violence, and state violence as Black men and Black people of all genders, and additionally have been subject.
Obviously, there's so much more. It's hard to just hear them talking about it, but it is ultimately incredibly important that we do so and give them the space and the platform to do so. Very proud of this, and again, 2021 Journalism Podcast Episode of the Year, New York Press Club. So thank you to them for recognizing our work. All right, gentlemen, let's go. I have a little flashy, cool thing that says, "Welcome to our guests." So let's do it. Gentlemen, welcome our guest.
All right. We are honored today to have Lewis Conway Jr., National Campaign Strategist for the ACLU. Chris just mentioned people dedicating their lives to helping people. Lewis is doing just that. Lewis, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute honor, particularly the work that you guys are doing on a weekly basis. Thank you for having me. We
appreciate it, Lewis. Definitely. So there's an important story that's ongoing that's getting some coverage, but I still don't know how much it's penetrating, the consciousness of people. So we're really hoping that you could break it down. So Lewis, can you just explain for the people who are unaware, what's happening to the thousands of people who were released from federal prison by the Trump administration at the height of COVID-19, and how the Biden administration is responding to that?
Thank you for actually raising the amplification on this issue. And I'm not certain a lot of folks have heard the term CARES, but I don't know if they know what that stands for. Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, right? It was the CARES Act. And it was designed to be a pressure valve for the federal prison system, but also, provide some compassion to people who are in cages during the height of COVID or the pandemic. And since that And since that time, there's been this surge of belief that because folks have been vaccinated, because COVID numbers have dropped, for some reason, those folks that were allowed to be sent home to home confinement, for some reason, the Office of Legal Counsel, which is a department of the Department of Justice, believes that almost 4,000 people who have been home since January should go back to prison. Now, we believe that this is a canary in a coal mine moment for Biden in regards to compassion, in regards to really holding to the campaign promises he made Black folks while he ran, and just being, a bit frank. Also, going back to the '94 crime bill, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right. So we feel like there are some things that we don't believe holding people, to the fire for the rest of their lives, but certainly we believe in holding folks accountable that ran on a certain platform, which indicated that they would employ compassion, reason, and not punishment as a means of reducing the impact of mass incarceration on American families. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Now, Lewis, I'm wondering if you've had a chance to speak with any of these people, and if so, sort of what's their emotions like? What's going on over there in their households?
Several of the families, we believe that people are experts in their own conditions. And as we are looking to talk to Biden, we want to make sure that the folks who are directly impacted by these issues are doing the most talking. And so folks across the nation are dealing with having come home to their families, being able to father again, being able to mother again, in some cases even have an opportunity of going to college, doing things that obviously if they were in prison they wouldn't be able to do. But I think more importantly, because they're out of prison, they're able to do. And so, the feeling is, I'm finally home with my family, and you're going to rip our family apart. I'm finally out of that cage, and now I have to go back. And I think it's so important for us to remember that the folks who were released were First Step Act eligible. Even more so, they even made the conditions more stringent. So these folks haven't been convicted of anything more than a white-collar crime or drug-related crime. Not that we should delineate between those two, but just to kind of, assuage people's fears. Those folks that we're talking about, the 4,000 people who were released, were folks who were elderly, the folks who had been convicted of nonviolent crimes, folks who, in most cases, shouldn't have been there in the first place. So let's get that. So let's be clear there. The onus of the people that we're talking about sending back to prison shouldn't have been there in the first place. And I think that part of it is missed.
Yeah, definitely. And Lewis, thank you for bringing up the what these people were initially charged of, especially the drug crimes, obviously, which we know still has an ongoing. The drug war is still ongoing, and it's hurting people even who were arrested and convicted years or decades ago. Lewis, can you just the COVID experience was sort of, a lot of experts pointed to that as this pivotal moment, especially in this era of mass incarceration, where we can take this as an opportunity to release people, decarcerate the prisons and jails in this country. And it seems like we're obviously going a step back in some cases. So can you just sort of talk about the importance you mentioned earlier, but of decarcerating during COVID, just because of how that disease spreads like wildfire and other diseases spread like wildfire inside these institutions, and sort of why it's still important?
Absolutely, and I'll take that in two pieces. I think what's most important is that the most effective vaccination is decarceration.
Right.
Time and time again, the science has shown us that the less amount of people that is in a confined space or in a space period, the less transmissible the virus is. And so what we have tried to show from the very beginning is that science has indicated that when you depopulate these correctional facilities, jails, prisons, and detention centers, you dramatically reduce the transmission rate, but also the infection rate, which subsequently impacts the death rate. And so far, there have been, almost 2,000 people who have died from COVID. And while that doesn't, seem like a lot compared to the amount of people that have died in America, there's 2,000 people in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And those are folks that died because they were not sentenced to death. They were sentenced based upon us not knowing how to handle social control beyond the cage. Nonetheless, the threat of COVID then is almost has almost been exasperated because the root issue has never been dealt with in jails, prisons, and detention centers. Even now, guards are refusing to get vaccinated. Even now, the rise in death rates is indicative of the fact that the way we are approaching the coronavirus in jails, prisons, and detention center has been a lambasted failure.
Yeah.
Now, with the Delta variant, we are actually considering taking people who have been home and putting them in an environment where they can possibly contract an even deadlier iteration of this virus, not because they did something wrong, not because they came home and improved their lives, but because the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel, is bent on following this directive to the letter. Now, I think it's very important to understand we're not asking Congress to do anything. All we're asking Biden to do is keep to your word, do what you said you were going to do. But it's not hard. It's not even a process or a procedure question. It's about signing an executive order in compassion, saying that these folks not only deserve to stay home, but they shouldn't have been locked up in the first place. But the only way for us to restore the soul of America is to begin to deal with those folks in those cages.
And Lewis, if Biden goes through with this, as you mentioned, and we all know his stated reforms, wouldn't this be hypocritical? And if so, how does the common person call him out on that?
As we are watching, plea bargains being handed out for attacking the Capitol, as we are watching police officers tearfully replay the events of that day, we are actually find it complexing that we're having this conversation about keeping people out of prison while we have folks attack the Capitol and we're giving them plea bargains. Not that we are comparing that in any sense, but we're saying, let's fix one thing first, which is something you broke 30 years ago. Let's fix that first. Let's hold you to what you said you were going to do, which is reduce the impact and the footprint of mass incarceration in Black and brown communities if we voted for you. And most importantly, let's begin to look at compassion as an antidote to mass incarceration, because punishment in cages hasn't worked thus far.
Yeah. And hey, Lewis, so often don't like to throw out these stats because, people, like you mentioned, this nation has yet to deal with the societal problems that have contributed to mass incarceration and why people are in this situation. But I think it was the director of the federal prison system himself who said of the 20,000 people recently released over a few years, about only 20 people recommitted crimes. All right. So it shows that releasing people work. So can you just talk about that, how releasing people and the way in which you do it is better for society?
Absolutely. When we talk about the economic vitality of America right now and how businesses are having a difficult time finding employees, it's not because there are not employees available. It's because we have set this certain standard of employment that is based upon a person's worst day of their life for the rest of their lives. The fact that I did 8 years in prison, 12 years on parole has nothing to do with my ability to run a cash register. And as we look at the long-term impact of our approach to reducing crime and our approach to addressing crime, what we've actually done is created a third-class citizen within our citizenry, within our citizen ranks. And it's a permanent class. I got convicted when I was 22 years old. I am 51, and just last month, my wife and I were attempting to find a home, and Governor Murphy signed a Fair Chance Housing Act. And so what they use in response is a credit report. So I did 12 years on parole. I couldn't find employment. McDonald's wouldn't hire me. So of course my credit has a hole in it. Then I've got child support payments that show up as loans. They don't show up as child support payments. They don't say I'm paying on those. It just shows up as an outstanding loan. And so my point is, as folks are leaving prisons, jails, and institutions, not only are they dealing with the trauma of being in a cage, but they're also dealing with trying to reacclimate themselves to an environment that has become not only adverse to their families, but adverse to them entering back into it. Yet our economy depends on fair chance housing. Our economy depends on fair chance hiring. I would venture to say that there's not one store owner, one business owner that doesn't want everyone in the community around his store employed. I'm quick to say that the best way to stop a bullet is with a job.
Right.
And so as we are looking at addressing mass incarceration, we really have to think about the way law enforcement undergirds our economic system. Now, I'm taking off my ACLU hat for a moment and talking and talking about how, we've got school police, we got park police, we got state police, we got federal police, we got secret police, we got secret police that watch the secret police, we got judges, we got lawyers, we got courtrooms. So our whole economic system is built upon this law enforcement structure. And we wonder why there's such a push to get people back in there. And we wonder why there's such a rush to make sure that we don't legalize marijuana as quickly as possible. And that we still are locking folks up in states where marijuana is legal. There are folks still doing time.
Right.
Because there's a law there is an economic incentive to incarcerate Black and brown bodies at a rate that has been indicative of why mass incarceration has become such a decimating impact on Black and brown communities across the country. As you've often heard the statistic, we hold 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. even on the best days, those ratios don't play out. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's incredible insights, and horrifically underreported, as you know.
And I'm jealous of Manny's glasses and his hat and those headphones. I just want you to know off top. And if
it's all I contribute to the show.
If my wife was here, she would tell you that you are a fashion icon.
I appreciate that.
You don't need to blow. You need to blow his head more.
We're going to be hearing about this every future show now.
I gotta give props where props are due.
It's all good. You know, I was initially upset. I thought we were having Conway the Machine on the show. You know what I mean? But
Buffalo, New York. Listen, I've been trying to reach out to my brother. I'm like, Conway, it's your bro.
Let's go.
You know, I got a son in Rochester. You know, I'm originally from Austin, Texas.
Okay.
And so when I found about Conway the Machine, I told my wife, I say, babe, we got family in Buffalo. We don't even know. We got family in Buffalo. It's my man.
That's right. Griselda represent. It's all good.
Absolutely.
All good.
You guys do great work, and I'm honored and humbled to be on your show.
Appreciate you.
We're honored and humbled to have you. And I just have one last question for you. I want to bring it back to our first question, really about that impact on families. And now our next guest after you, Dr. Ram Sandaresh, he just co-authored this study on incarceration and family health, and just basically underscoring how when you lock someone up and you put them in a cage, you're not just locking up an individual and putting them in a cage, you're putting an entire family, you're putting their friends and family. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little more just about, you know, these people are home now, like you said, they're back being fathers, they're back being mothers, and just what this is going to do, what Biden's going to do to these families.
That's such a salient point when you talk about the collateral consequences. You know, the collateral benefits of compassion, the collateral consequences of taking a punishment route towards incarceration and towards our criminal system. I think, you know, it's 4,000 people that we're able to index, but the impact is exponential. You know, every individual has at least two parents. So that brings that 4,000 already up to 8,000. Some folks, you know, at least have one child. Most folks have two. So now that number's up to 16,000 folks who are impacted. You know, some folks went to prison and their grandmother, they were taking care of their grandmother. They were taking care of their grandfather. They were taking care of their aunts. So when you look at the exponentiality of the impact of locking folks up, bringing folks home and sending them back, you're literally talking about tens and thousands of folks who are going to be impacted. Again, these folks should have never been locked up in the first place. I think it's important for us to keep that kind of forward.
Right.
Secondly, they should never be eligible to be sent back. Having them in prison has done nothing for our safety. Having them in prison has only harmed our economy. Having them in prison has only decimated their families, destroyed the connective tissues of our community, and literally dissolved the fabric of our democracy. And so at what point are we going to look to compassion as an antidote to mass incarceration?
It's amazing, Lewis. We really appreciate it. Just really quick, if you could help people out, let them know sort of what they can do to maybe spread the word and inform, you know, their family and friends, and also reach the Biden administration. I know there was a Twitter hashtag that went viral, but so can you just talk about ways in which people can get involved really quick?
Absolutely. One of the first ways is ACLU.org/clemency. We have a petition that we're going to present to the Biden administration. You can also, again, go to ACLU.org, and we've got a CARES Act package, right?
Right.
But I think most importantly is for you to reach out to your congressman and really share with them what you believe, you know, compassion means, and what you believe he should do in regards to what he said he would do.
Right.
I think that's most important.
Definitely. We have to hold people accountable, especially people holding the most powerful office in the land. Lewis, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, your insights. You're invaluable to this episode today. So thank you so much. Lewis, again, take care, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
You guys have a good one. I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. There it is. Lewis Conway Jr. breaking it down. Wow.
Incredible.
Like I said, as someone with someone incarcerated right now who's as close to me as a brother, it all, hits home, and that compassion angle is super important.
Yeah. I mean, he broke it. I mean, I just like the way that he kept going back to sort of holding people accountable. I know there's so much to do in politics. There's so much to focus on. But this will have immediate consequences on people's lives. We don't know when this pandemic, who knows when it's going to end. We have surges, but I just can't imagine what people are thinking right now in their heads, what their family members are thinking as they sit at home at night, wondering if and when they're going back to prison.
Yeah. And the fact that he brought up as well, this rapidly spreading Delta variant,
right?
So they're going to put all these people back in there just as this thing's hitting again. I mean, it's,
Well, listen, I love how you guys went into, and how Lewis went into the exponential effects on family members, on community, really. If it goes past family into community. But I think this segues nicely into our next guest, who is waiting in the electronic wings, as it were. So allow me once again to play the flashy, cool thingy thing that says, welcome our guest.
All right. So now we have joining us Dr. Ram Sundaresh, who co-authored a groundbreaking study recently on incarceration and family health and all the consequences of that. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate it.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, and if you can, I just want you to sort of explain the study. What were your findings, and what was sort of why was it so important for you to do this?
Yeah. So first of all, we were looking at what are the effects on family members. I think it sounds like there's been a really rich discussion already about what are the impacts of incarceration, how does that affect communities and our fabric of society, and there's already a lot of really strong data on all the different facets of life that get affected by incarceration, financial, social, health impacts. And we wanted to explore further, not only how does this affect family members, but what does this look like for their overall well-being? And by well-being, what we meant was, what is the holistic quality of someone's life? Are they suffering? Are they surviving? Are they thriving? And what does that look like with these experiences? And I think a lot of people out there who have had family members incarcerated already experience this, and they know what that's like. And so we wanted to shed light on this with data, so we could show the rest of the world what these families already know about these experiences, that it really negatively impacts well-being. And we also wanted to look at, in addition to well-being, if we could calculate estimates of life expectancy, because there's already so much data on how much this affects health and different aspects of physical health and mental health, substance use, and we wanted to look at how does this affect health disparities. We know that there's such a large disproportionate impact of incarceration on Black and Brown communities, and we know that there's a lot of health disparities that these communities already face, and so we wanted to look at what are the associations with life expectancy when you start to look at these different family member incarceration experiences. And so the main things that we found are that, perhaps not surprisingly, having a family member incarcerated is associated with lower well-being in basically every domain: physical health, mental health, social, financial, spiritual well-being. It's also associated with lower life expectancy. What we didn't expect was just how strong of an association that was. It's almost 2.6 years lower life expectancy for having an immediate family member incarcerated.
Wow.
So it's really profound, especially when you think about how many people out there have had a family member incarcerated, and just the repercussions on health and well-being and disparities in our nation.
Well, doctor, yeah, and as we discussed just previously, the United States is the world's leading prison state, and so I'm curious, what percentage of people surveyed reported having an incarcerated or formerly incarcerated family member, and did you guys break that down by race and gender?
We did. So about 45% of people in the United States overall have ever had a family member incarcerated, and within Black individuals, that number is even higher, 63%, and that really reflects just how different the system is based on who you are, and the amount of resources you have, and this is a very racialized system, which is not news, but just the sheer numbers is 63% of Black individuals having an immediate family member incarcerated is pretty mind-blowing when you just consider how many millions and millions of people that is.
Yeah, and on that note, what can you tell us about how incarceration specifically impacts the Black community and those families in particular?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So a lot of the research that's out there that have tried to tease apart what are the mechanisms of how this is actually playing out, for example, within the domain of physical health, people have less material support. They have a lot more stress. That manifests as having more chronic medical conditions that are harder to control. People have higher blood pressure. People are more overweight. There's a greater mental health effect. And when you look at, for example, all the different ways that different family member roles are affected, if you have, let's say your parents are incarcerated, then you don't have someone that's taking care of you, and that role may fall onto someone else who then has even more on their plate, and they're getting even more spread thin. It's harder for them to keep up with their job. It's harder for them to take care of their own health, and all these things start to snowball. If you have a spouse or a partner who's incarcerated, you have less emotional support. Your mental health is going to suffer. You have less social well-being. You're less engaged with your community. It's harder for you to access healthcare. All these different mechanisms are what's panning out in all the rest of the literature and what people are experiencing day to day.
And Doctor, I know for years women were the fastest growing part of the prison population, and obviously a lot of those women are mothers. Is there anything in your research sort of detailing the impact that's had on families as well?
So our research hasn't specifically looked at the mother-child relationship, but you're right, there is a lot of research that has, and there are a lot of negative consequences in both directions. Being the child of someone who's a mother who's incarcerated has a lot of negative outcomes, and being a mother who is themselves incarcerated has a lot of negative outcomes. And so it does go in both directions. Our particular study looked at kind of all comers. So we looked at all immediate family members as well as extended family members. So we looked at, partners, parents, children within immediate, and then within extended family members that goes out as far as, cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents. And so we can really start to see these like intergenerational effects. And, for example, some of the previous literature has shown that, there definitely are these intergenerational effects. And, if you have an adult who's incarcerated, the grandparents or the elderly parents of that adult who is incarcerated then may have greater caregiving responsibilities. And that can affect mental health, that can affect finances, that can affect physical health. And so the same is certainly true of the mother-child relationship as well, and has really important implications for not only the racial disparities, but the gender disparities as well when we think about the disproportionate effect on women.
Yeah, and when I saw this study, to me, first I was sort of amazed, to be honest, because I don't think I ever saw anything like this before. Though there, people do look at the collateral consequences and everything like that, but not this sort of holistic approach to incarceration. What do you think lawmakers and policymakers can sort of leverage from this to try to help improve people's lives? I know obviously one answer is obviously decarceration. We just have too many people in jails and prison, but I'm just wondering what you think they can leverage to from this research that you did.
Yeah, definitely. So I think decarceration, that's the elephant in the room. The more we can decarcerate, the better we can prevent a lot of these negative outcomes that our data and so many other projects out there have been showing for years. There's a lot of different ways to decarcerate. We could talk about, jail diversion programs, better support for substance use disorders, economic support, social safety net programs. But aside from decarceration, I think our work is also showing that these families really need a lot of help. They need a lot of support. They're taking a huge toll from having a family member incarcerated, and there are more things that we can do to support them materially, to support their physical health, supporting their mental health, providing more resources, counseling, more community resources for them to get support, job opportunities, housing, basically building up the social safety net, but especially for this group that's affected so strongly by their family members being incarcerated.
And Doctor, Rashad and I have covered incarceration, both as reporters in the field and also, with the podcast. And in the previous segment here, we sort of described it as it's not just one person you put in a cage. It's and our guest said exponential. So I'd really just like to really flesh that out more for people, because I feel that this aspect of the mass incarceration crisis rarely gets mentioned. The family rarely gets mentioned, and that's why Rashad, we find this report so important. So please, if you could just talk about how when you take whoever it is, male or female, and you put them in a cage, some of those consequences to the other family members.
Yeah, absolutely. It's often invisible to people who haven't experienced it firsthand. And so when we look at the total pie chart of the U.S. population, it's roughly 330 million individuals in our country. The data set that we used, the initial team that had collected that data, their findings were showing that it's roughly 45% of all Americans with an immediate family member incarcerated, and around 63% of African Americans who've had a family member incarcerated. So when you take 63% of 330 million, that's well over 150 million people right there.
Wow.
It's 150 million people multiplied by this profound impact on every aspect of their life. And just to put it into perspective, so when we calculate these life expectancy projections, for an individual having 2.6 years lower life expectancy projection from an immediate family member incarcerated, that's similar to being incarcerated yourself.
Wow.
Which is that's mind-blowing to me.
It's incredible.
And it compounds from there that, people have multiple family members incarcerated, and it only gets worse. So what our data is showing is that if you've had 3 or more immediate family members incarcerated, that's equivalent to almost 4 years of life expectancy reduction. That's equivalent to having a heart attack. And so it's such a huge toll, and it really can't be understated. Multiplied by just how many millions and millions of people, over 150 million people who are likely in this group. It's tragic, and it's really sobering to think about how this unfolds in our society in every aspect. The finance. When we talk about our healthcare system falling apart, this is at the roots of that too. We have to grapple with criminal justice when we talk about health justice and health equity. Bridging that divide and health disparities between Black and white Americans. This is a large part of that. The role of incarceration and all the effects on family life, finances, and the fabric of community.
And Doctor, just really quick before we let you go, when was this research conducted? I'm just wondering if it was before or after COVID, because we all saw with COVID, just people were shut out from their families. They couldn't visit them personally. There was difficulties getting in touch. So I'm just wondering what impact COVID may have had on this research, if any.
Yeah. So this data was all collected before COVID. The data itself were collected from 2018, and it was analyzed around like 2019, 2020. So all of this was pre-COVID, but a lot of these issues only get further compounded by the pandemic itself. And there've been a lot of people working really hard to get people out of prisons and back into their communities, back into their homes, because just the social isolation and all these negative effects of being in the middle of a global pandemic where it's so hard to even just survive and get by on your own. It's just that much harder when you have a family member who is locked up and behind bars.
Just amazing work that you and your team did, the other researchers and authors, Dr. Sundaresh, we really appreciate it. How can people get their hands on this? As journalists, we're always trying to find studies and reports, but we know the general population isn't as adept at it. So how can people learn more about this?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to learn more. You can find our study by looking at, JAMA Network, searching for Sundaresh family member incarceration. You can look it up there. My mentor, Dr. Emily Wong, is in charge of the SAGE Center for Health and Justice at Yale School of Medicine. That's another great resource to find a lot of different initiatives to address mass incarceration in our country. And then also just talking to people. I think what our data is showing is that it's just so common. You probably know people in your social network who've been affected by this, and listening to them and understanding what their experiences have been is another way to just better get plugged into how this is affecting our country, because it's in our backyard, it's in our communities, and it's likely affecting people you already know.
Wow. Well, Dr. Sundaresh, we really appreciate you coming on today and just going over this research. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing what else you produce in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you, Doctor. What a fantastic angle. Again, as someone who has a family member myself who's been incarcerated for some time, pseudo family member, brother from another mother, but family nonetheless. It's really... I have personally been very affected by his incarceration, and I'm not a direct family member, but I know his family. I know them. This is my family in a way, and I know it. I feel it. And as we talk about so often, how important it is to take the things that we kind of know anecdotally, that we feel in our gut, and apply science and data and research to those feelings. And so I was very intrigued and impressed by this report. So wow.
Yeah, mind-blowing stuff to even. I mean, we've talked to people who sort of, I guess, talked around the edges of these kind of issues before, right? But never this direct with data. He brought it up, Chris, when you asked that last question, but I didn't want us to gloss over the 2.6 less years on average of your life because of someone who's incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. And that he talked about, if you have more than one person in your family incarcerated, how that jumps up even higher. So I hope policymakers get their hands on this research and start doing something about it.
I mean, we just talked about 4,000 people in the first segment who are early release because of COVID, but now going to get sent back. Folks that are, first step eligible, you don't have to put them back in. They didn't necessarily have to be there in the first place. I don't care if you're a staunch, advocate for incarceration. But if you've let people out and they're not causing any trouble and they're not doing anything crazy, it doesn't make sense to then say, okay, COVID's over, put them back in jail. That's, first of all, COVID's not over. That's ridiculous. But to do that, just being out then in, like, you're exact. And so the 4,000 people, and if both these gentlemen are correct in that it affects family members on an exponential basis, you're talking about tens of thousands of people that are affected by this very easy to change directive alone, much less the greater criminal justice system, at large.
Yeah. Just final note from me. I mean, I found both of those interviews incredibly profound, and testament to the doctor's findings. With I guess 60% within the African American community, 50% overall. I mean, 2 out of the 4 people on that call, have family members incarcerated for an extended amount of time. And for me, for anyone listening who has been incarcerated or has family members who are incarcerated, when you're in that experience, you don't think of these things. You just do what you got to do to survive. And it's sort of shocking. Again, I said profound, to see a report that comes in and says, oh, yeah, by the way, this has serious freaking effects on you as a family member. And in fact, it's going to lessen how long you're on this planet. That's great. And so I would implore those listening and those watching who do know someone incarcerated to check out that report, because you're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn a lot about the people that you love around you, and you're probably going to learn some things in there that are going to help you. So just incredible stuff.
Yeah. Once again, I just want to compliment you both for not only, recognizing the stories that we need to help tell on this show, finding the folks who are so incredible at speaking on these topics. You know what I mean? I'm surprised. Like, you guys delve into it during the week, and then we do the show, and I do all the technical stuff, and I come and I be flashy and have nice headphones. But I learned so much from watching.
I knew we were going to hear about the headphones.
I had to bring it back.
Look, I just got new glasses, so I was a little offended because these are brand new. These are like 2 days old.
I'm complimenting you guys in your competence, but obviously I'm the peacock of the family. So you know what I mean?
I think if Lewis would have seen this, maybe he would have.
The Albania flag. I mean,
I don't know.
Shouts to Albania. Shouts to Tirana.
But
listen, I want to compliment you guys. I want to remind people who are listening on the podcast feed that you can actually engage in these shenanigans with us Wednesdays live at 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. You can find out more information about these shows at usnewsbeat.com/watch. And of course, we go deeper into these topics. We've covered mass incarceration in great depth on Newsbeat, the podcast. We've delved into specifically the effects of coronavirus on the incarcerated population in America, our friends, neighbors, and family members that are incarcerated. We've delved into these topics in great detail. So if you catch this tonight and say, wow, these guys are really on it because they know who to talk to, well, we've been doing this. We will continue to do this both on the podcast and on this show weekly. And of course, once again, thanks to the New York Press Club for recognizing our work in doing so, as Newsbeat Podcast has been named the 2021 Journalism Podcast of the Year, with our specifically with our episode #SayHerName, confronting 400 years of state violence against Black women and girls. It's an amazing ride that we've been on, telling these stories. We get to do it here every week. Gentlemen, what are we going to get into as we wrap up the show? We skipped some news bites. I'd like to circle back to them if that's cool with you, and we can get out of here. Is that cool with you?
Let's hit it.
All right. Do I have to?
Well, your bite was us being awesome, right?
That's true,
it's just me and Chris.
My bite is going to reiterate Lewis's bite, which was props to the gear.
All right.
Oh.
Well,
so how about we say this? How about we openly tell people we're going to re-release Say Her Name. So since it's pertinent, since we're talking about it, we'll re-release that baby.
Yeah,
and we'll let people listen.
I think that's a
after
great
they
idea.
listen to this.
I think that's a great idea. We're going to re-release that episode, our award-winning episode. We're going to follow up with a This Week in Social Justice dedicated to that topic, to that episode, perhaps with some of the voices that we heard in that episode in the very near future. I'm not sure exactly when this will happen, but we're going to do that. So that's going to be our we are awesome, but we are not awesome for us. We are awesome because of the stories and the people that we center in our reporting. So kudos to everyone involved in that episode. You don't hear our voices in the episode. You hear us here. We get to kind of, ruffle our feathers and what do you call it when you
boast?
Peacocking.
Your chest. What's the word?
You're peacocking.
Yeah, we get to do that. We get to do that here.
Thump your chest.
Yes, but yeah.
That.
But in the episodes, it's all business, and you don't hear from us. You only hear the voices of our.
This is why people need to watch. This is
why people need to watch. I was doing that, and I'm not a King Kong fan. I'm Godzilla, although Team Godzilla. Anyway, but yet, Rashad, you did have a news bite that I think was relevant, and I'd like to talk about it real quick.
All right, Leah, let me hit that really quick, and maybe we'll get into it longer during a different show because I
think it's really important. So please, Daniel Hale, speak on it. Wait, let me do the thing.
I just want to get to a comment that we had really quick on YouTube. Did we forget Biden authored the racist 1994 crime bill? We did not forget. Lewis actually mentioned that when he was circling back to holding Biden accountable,
right?
How mass incarceration is a result of his, let's say it. He was one of the chief spokespeople for that piece of legislation when it was on Capitol Hill, helping Bill Clinton get it across the aisle and have it signed by the then president. So, we did not forget. Lewis mentioned it, and there's definitely long-lasting consequences of the 1994 crime bill, and Biden obviously still has to answer for that. The news bite that we were talking about. So Daniel Hale is a whistleblower who leaked drone papers, sort of slides about what's going on with America's drone warfare, and allegedly leaked it to The Intercept. The Intercept doesn't claim to have received those papers because as a journalism outlet, they never actually are going to say where they got it from, who they got it from, or confirm that. But this was huge, and Daniel Hale's probably one of the most important whistleblowers you've never heard of in your entire life. Even though as these leaks were coming out a few years ago, people were calling him the so-called second Snowden. He had his different reasons for leaking this important information, which was classified, and it revealed the massive drone, the legalized, I guess, drone system that we had in this country. And it was something that really started with George Bush, but was amplified by Barack Obama while he was in president. Obama really is responsible for really bolstering this program. And also, that's not all we learned just about, the secret details of drone warfare in this country. We also learned about the secret watch list that they had and kill list that went all the way up to Obama's desk, and how people ended up on those watch lists and the legality of that. If you guys remember, American citizens were killed by the U.S. government with drones. And even though, those people are obviously going to be called terrorists, we as a country need to deal with the fact that our government, without getting legal justification in terms of arresting someone via the courts or whatever, killed people with weapons. So definitely look up Daniel Hale. He was sentenced to 45 months in prison. We just talked about Reality Winner, who leaked information about how Russia was potentially trying to hack certain aspects of different states' election systems. So there's an ongoing war on journalism in this country. And when we don't want to just say that to talk about ourselves as reporters. When there's an ongoing war on journalism, it creates a chilling effect where people, potentially sources, become afraid of leaking important information to the public. And without that information, the American citizenry is unable to make judgments for themselves of what our government should be doing in our names.
Yeah, 100%. And we've talked about it in depth. I think one of the episodes that's important is the Espionage Act and the battle for the free press. We've talked about a couple of other episodes. We've talked about these issues in a couple of other episodes, at least 3 or 4 episodes where we've talked about the attack on either journalism or whistleblowers. Whistleblowers, which then ultimately leak to journalists, in most cases. This is a great thing to bring up. I think this is, you phrase this in the lead up to this episode as the whistleblower most people have never heard of.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's. I actually encourage everybody to obviously read the original pieces from The Intercept, but
Sure.
New York Magazine, I think, did an amazing profile on Daniel Hale. And I don't know if I shared the link with you, but if people just Google it, New York Magazine, Daniel Hale, it really just paints a picture of what he was thinking. And if I may, just to close out the show,
please.
I will read what he actually told the court when he was being sentenced, because I think it's profound and it really speaks to why he felt like he had to do it.
This
is the letter, but I'm reading it from an Intercept story.
Okay.
So Daniel told the judge, quote, "I am here because I stole something that was never mine to take. Precious human life," obviously turning it around, stealing the documents, saying stealing life. I couldn't keep living in a world in which people pretend that things weren't happening that were. Please, Your Honor, forgive me for taking papers instead of human lives. I think that's profound what he's saying. He's saying you need to judge. You could judge me, but we also need to look at the consequences of what our government is doing.
100%.
Yeah, and I just want to add, and you just showed a quick flash of it, but that 11-page letter that he wrote to the judge, I read most of it prior to the show. And if you really want to get some insight into, why he would risk, I think the original sentence where he was facing was 11 years in prison, to get this out to the public, it's all laid out there. I mean, it goes into such horrific detail. Really, he was hearing one thing from the president himself, and he was actually executing a completely other thing. Yeah. And so he felt that the public was being lied to, and it obviously was costing thousands upon thousands of civilian lives. And he goes into graphic detail in some of those anecdotes.
And again, this is something we've covered on multiple occasions, from Chelsea Manning to Reality Winter to Daniel Hale to the Espionage Act. I want to shout out. I just want to do this. Patrick's Time has been weighing in a lot this episode, and quoting the Espionage Act, the Obama administration specifically. And again, I briefly flashed our episode about that. I don't know if Patrick's Time listens to the podcast or is just tuning into but can you guys just, I know we're almost out of time. Please emphasize the work that you've done, specifically looking into the Espionage Act as a tool to silence the free press.
Yeah, definitely. That the Espionage Act, as we documented that episode that you're showing on the screen, was originally meant to go after spies during World War I. It's that old of a law, and it initially was used to actually go after socialists. Right, what the government deemed political enemies, people who were speaking out against the war effort. Right. For decades, journalists weren't attacked. There was, at one point, they tried to go after the Chicago Tribune, I want to say, for information that was leaked about World War II. And then, obviously, we had Daniel Ellsberg, and that's when this really kicked off this war, which then evolved. And again, Obama, who was responsible for amplifying the drone wars and the civilian casualties associated with that, he, as Patrick, I think, is quoting, it was his administration that charged more people under the Espionage Act than any other presidential administration combined. And one reason that when we were doing the good old print paper before the podcast, we were trying to beat the drum about it. Chris and I were in DC covering these things. Right. We were in Maryland covering Chelsea Manning's trial when so many journalists decided to ignore it.
We were in the courtroom.
In the courtroom physically.
Out of how many journalists in the Chelsea Manning court-martial, how many journalist outlets were there?
Less than a dozen for one of the most important stories of our generation. Yeah.
Y'all were there. Just wanted to give y'all props. Keep going.
So yeah, what I was going to say is that the reason we do this is because people had trust in Obama, right? There was just, for some reason, people just trusted him, right? So if he was doing something bad, people were trying to brush it off their shoulder. What we were trying to say is if one guy does it, he sets a precedent for other presidents to do the same thing or even worse. And then Trump came along and he also executed a horrific campaign against journalists. I think I might be wrong, but almost equaling the amount of people prosecuted during the Obama years. So when we talk about these things, you might not like it because of sort of political reasons, but you just don't want the next person to do the same thing or make it even worse.
Right. So I do want to point out, like I said, Patrick's Time, thank you for your comments. We appreciate the interaction. We appreciate your comments. We agree with a lot of what you're saying, apparently. But again, if you haven't already, and for anyone else listening, the importance of whistleblowers / the free press is a topic that really hits home with us with the Chelsea Manning episode, Collateral Murder. Was the name of our episode. The one I have on the screen right now, Enemy of the American People, the U.S. government's war on journalism and press freedom. The one I showed before, which was Espionage Act and the battle for the free press. This is a topic that is recurring for us. We've covered it in the past and in great detail and in such a compelling manner. And so we're talking about these things this week in social justice. They flitter across the screen, but please take time to go check out our full podcast. They are like documentaries mixed with music, and in those two episodes we actually have some of our incredible independent hip-hop artists that amplify the message in such a unique, compelling way that it not only sticks with you, it not only helps explain the issue in every man's terms. It not only does it kind of paints a picture, but it happens to be award-winning, and people seem to like it. So we encourage you to check out our podcast feed, the Newsbeat podcast, wherever you find podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Newsbeat, 2 words, Newsbeat, 2 words, one love. And we're out here doing this work. I appreciate you gentlemen for that dedication to the amplification of the issues of the free press. Too many people walk around with this blinders on. The media, fake news, the media's garbage. And yeah, we have a lot of issues with mainstream media. We talk about them on this show and behind the scenes a lot. But you guys really cut to the core of where journalism as an institution, as that fourth estate, is threatened by the very government that the fourth estate exists to hold in check. So I really appreciate your work. I've learned so much from y'all, and I know that our listeners and our watchers have too. So thank you for that news beat and the little bit of a rabbit hole that it led to. I think it's super freaking important. That being said, Chris, I know we're really late, but you want to give your update real quick and then we'll move on?
I mean, sure.
Let's go.
I'll just try to do it real quick.
Shed wants to watch the draft or something. I don't know.
Real quick.
My wife
real
wants
quick,
to go to sleep, I think.
Real quick. Real quick.
Too. Yes. It's important.
Yeah, it's important to stay on top of the story. And this is the story of residential schools, those horrific, hellish, really death camps that were across Canada, other countries too.
Including ours.
That in Canada specifically, over 150,000 Indigenous children were stolen and put in there and tortured, sexually abused. Thousands never made it home. And just recently, you might have seen the headlines, there are 3 mass graveyards and fields of unmarked graves at three different, there were over 100 of these death camps And this story, real quick, that I saw that I would like to share is just that a tribe in Manitoba is calling and screaming and pleading for massive criminal investigations into all of the schools. And it's just sobering to continue reading the article and find out that there's only been one launched in that province, and they're safeguarding. They're very, very, very tight-lipped about if anyone will ever, be named or anything like that. Because remember, these schools existed up until the 1990s.
That's crazy.
So
that's crazy. If you're just, if you're just learning about this topic, we're speaking to people who are regular listeners. But if you're just understanding it for the first time, do a little bit of research on the residential schools in Canada. Also, the United States had some part to play in this. We're delving into this in greater detail, but these stories have been breaking recently, and they're horrific.
Yeah. And just that second story that with the clip there,
yep.
That's tied to it is so, you can say investigation, and there needs to be massive investigation, just as this tribe is calling for. But this article, this Guardian article, was the first I saw that really delved into just what that's going to entail, and it is going to be biblical in proportions. This is a forensic pathologist who was interviewed. She happens to be Indigenous, and she just lays it out. And you think about just what it takes to identify remains, that have been buried for even a couple months, let alone, a couple decades, and then identifying these poor children, because these children, as soon as they got into these schools, for the listeners and the viewers who may not know, their hair was cut, and the name that they were given at birth was erased. They were named after a saint or given a number.
The Catholic Church was totally behind this in a lot of cases, right?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And so forensically, how do you identify all of these children? You have to take samples from tribes who are living. You have to take DNA samples from each of these. Where do you keep that? How do you store that safely? How do you store that from getting contaminated? Once you identify someone, what do you do then? Do you take the remains and store them somewhere else? Do you bring them back to have a formal burial on their ancestral lands? Some tribes want that. Some tribes don't. Some tribes, it's never even been presented. All of these things. Where are the bodies going to be stored? Who's going to pay for this? So it's just incredible. It needs to be done. And these answers, what I loved about the story is it asks these incredible questions. And at the end of the day, these questions need answers.
Yeah.
And this needs to get done.
Yeah.
So those were my two news bites.
I appreciate that information. We're saying goodnight to Rashed, who signed off. Taking off a little bit early tonight. Early. We're late, so he's taking off on time. We're still going. Much love to Rashed. And thank you, Chris, for staying on top of the story. There are, we talk, I'm just going to wax politically for 20 seconds. We talk so much about what we do at Newsbeat and what we do at This Week in Social Justice about covering the stories that don't get the attention that they need. I watch cable news. I read the online things. I've subscribed to the New York Times. You'll catch some of this stuff if you're looking for this, you could find it deep in the crevices of media. But this residential school, and we're not in Canada, so obviously we don't, as Americans, we don't give two shits about Canada on a regular basis. Like, who cares? The regular person, right? That we don't get the news. We don't understand what's happening up there. We don't pay attention to it like they pay attention to us, because obviously America, we're the center of everything. But it's so disheartening. It's so revelatory these stories that you're bringing to light, I followed up on them. We have our friends at other podcasts that we know are covering these topics. Shouts to Unfucking the Republic, who's covering some of these things in different, from a different angle. I'm a regular guy, and I'm a news guy. I'm a news guy. I rock with y'all. I'm a news guy. I pay attention to these things. I would have never known about this if it wasn't for us.
Yeah, look, it's a blessing we get to do this, and we strive to show these underreported stories, and not even just underreported, ignored stories.
100%.
And that's what we do. So, and
it's not just Canada. There's a part that the United States had to play in all of this, and we're getting to that as well. So stick with us. Please pay attention to us. We know what we're doing. This isn't a joke. This isn't a game. We're on top of these things. We've been on top of them for a long time. And Chris, thank you for really sticking with this one and taking us through it. For regular listeners who have been watching or listening over time, I'm sure you appreciate it as much as I do. Very quickly, Rashad has left us in the fold, whereas in the past you've been abducted by UFOs. Rashad has been abducted by life. I do want to just let you take us out with your combination of news beating the past and news beating the future, recognizing and giving props to the late, great Robert Moses. Wait a minute.
Not that Robert Moses. Yeah. Just real quick. And
the other Robert Moses.
Yeah. I mean, and this is really, really quick, but truthfully, we should probably have an entire episode dedicated to this Bob Moses. But a civil rights icon just recently passed. He's been dubbed in the past couple of days, the civil rights hero that you most likely never heard of, or most Americans never heard of. Yep. He pretty much orchestrated the Freedom Bus Drive in 1964 and the Summer of Freedom, the Freedom Summer, where thousands of folks from the North went down to the South, specifically Mississippi, to help the voting rights there.
Right.
And there was much violence. There were 3 activists, notably, who disappeared. Later, their bodies had been found. They were murdered. Just 3 of so many murders that took place to try to suppress African Americans in this country.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I just thought it was his work helped lead to the Voting Rights Act being passed, and the attention that he brought to the struggle there. And there's the Atlantic piece, the quiet courage of Bob Moses. He's often been recognized as that silent voice, sort of controlling things from the back. He wasn't the Martin Luther King who was out in front of the cameras and the microphone.
Right.
He did the grunt work.
Right.
He was there in the field.
Right.
That's not to say, obviously MLK did the grunt work as well, but
sure.
No. But yeah. Bob Moses,
the unsung hero.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's the past and the future.
Thank you for that, Chris. I really appreciate that. His passing, again, barely, blink of an eye when it comes to, mainstream media. Certainly there are outlets that have covered it in greater detail than you would find on your normal, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News for sure. Nightly kind of glance on your TV screen. So thank you for, again, picking those items as the past and the future for us. We think it's certainly important to remember those who came before, the work they did to help inspire those who are working currently and in the future. So rest in peace to the late, great Bob Moses. If you want to be inspired, if you really feel that social justice and civil rights and voting rights and all the things are important to you, let's not just hashtag on our social networks. Let's look into and read the articles and watch the videos and learn about the work of people like Bob Moses, who certainly left a blueprint for us to follow. So that's it. This week is social justice. Thank you. This week is social justice. My name is Manny Faces. And on behalf of Rashed Mian, our managing editor, who dipped out but did a ton of work to get the show together, as he does every week. Chris Tawarski, you, sir, as the rock of our organization. Thank you again, the editor-in-chief of Newsbeat and This Week in Social Justice, to the Maury Creative Studios team, to everyone behind the scenes helping us make these things possible. And once again, thank you to the New York Press Club, who dubbed the Newsbeat podcast Say Her Name, confronting 400 years of state violence against black women and girls, as the 2021 Journalism Podcast episode of the year. Of the year. New York Times is in that cohort. They produce a lot of podcasts. The New Yorker, New York Magazine, NY1, Bloomberg, WNYC, which is a radio station that works with NPR and makes some of the... Listen, WNYC does some great podcasts. They do some great work. And we won over them. Thank you to them and to those judges, whoever is behind that, for recognizing the work we do. We come from a different angle. We come from a hip-hop mindset. We come from an alternative journalism mindset. And to me personally, when you combine those two things, the way that hip-hop folk look at the world, the way that alternative journalists look at the world, the way that investigative journalists look at the world, oh boy, we are uncovering and we see things in a whole different light. It's like the Matrix up in this piece. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, just final note on that. Obviously, again, huge honor. And we've said this in the previous episode. The honor, though, goes to the sources.
Yep.
We're dedicating this award to them, Michelle Jacobs and Andrea Ritchie. We're going to have an extended show with them back on there. And also, and perhaps most importantly, for whatever it's worth, I consider this award dedicated to the victims and the survivors
100%.
of that brutality that continues to this day. And for me, at the minimum, what this does is maybe someone is going to check out that episode and they're going to learn about the Say Her Name campaign and they're going to get involved.
Yeah.
We're going to learn about the stories behind these names.
Right. And both of those guests are affiliated with organizations that are doing the work to fight these injustices and to bring attention to these travesties that have plagued our nation since its founding. And again, as much as we criticize this nation, we know that the potential is there for us to be the nation that we were destined to be. And if we could just confront and work with these issues in the way that our guests and our advocates and our activists and the people that we center in our episodes are teaching us how to do, we will indeed be the nation we were destined to be. So, yes, I agree with you. All love and respect due to those who participate in our episodes. We are but vessels to carry forth the stories and the issues that need to be brought to the forefront. And we thank you for paying attention to us. If you're watching or you're listening or you're sharing, please share this. If you like what we do, don't just keep it to yourself. We don't want to be the best kept. I hate that person. The best kept secret. That's stupid. I don't want to be the best kept secret. I don't want to be a secret. Don't let us be a secret. Who wants to be the best kept? I hate that. I hate it. You shouldn't be a secret. Don't say that. I'm the best kept secret. Please. We don't want to be a secret. Please share this right now. Right now. Whatever you're watching, just share. Oh my God, these guys are great. Because it's not us. We are really telling the stories and centering the stories of others. Thank you so much for watching us. Thanks to Rashed. Thanks to you, Chris. We'll be back next week, Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Or you can follow these shows on the Newsbeat podcast feed. Go wherever you could find podcasts. If you're not into podcasts, literally, wherever you're watching this, just hit me. Just say, Manny, I don't know how to do a podcast. I don't know nothing about podcasts. How do I listen to what you do? And we'll teach you, we'll show you. But if you are into if you know a little bit about podcasts, go to Spotify, search for Newsbeat, 2 words. This says This Week in Social Justice, but it's all under the Newsbeat umbrella. Go to Apple Podcasts, Newsbeat, 2 words. You'll see the little fist with the logo and the whole thing. You'll find us. You'll follow us. You'll subscribe. You'll listen. We got some amazing full-length episodes coming out. Oh my God, the stuff we're working on, the stories we're working on, the voices we're bringing to you, the issues we're covering are going to blow your minds. We are not just the 2021 journalism podcast of the year for no reason. We're going to keep it going. We're working with y'all, and we appreciate y'all. Hit us up. Let us know what you think. Thanks to Patrick's time. Thanks to everyone tuned in and watching with us tonight. I guess we're out of here until next week. This week is social justice. Peace. We're out.
Peace.
Peace.